Hey everyone, before we get started, don't forget to subscribe. Click on that notification bell, like, dislike, comment. Let us know what you're thinking. You could also follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts. Now, today on the Angel of Words podcast, we have licensed clinical social worker and host of Beauteous Me on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts, Miss Jamilly Whitfield on deck on the Angel of Words podcast. Hello, welcome to the Angel of Words podcast. I am your host, Angel of Words, and today with us we have Miss Jamilly Whitfield, licensed clinical social worker and host of the podcast Beauteous Me. Miss Whitfield, hello. Thank you for joining the Angel of Words podcast today.
Hi, Angel. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored and blessed to be here and to spend this time with your audience. So ready to go. Super excited.
Well, I'm happy that you have that kind of energy because what we will be talking about today is reality.
Yes.
Is things that I haven't liked seeing, basically throughout the course of my life and things that apparently bother you as well.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I chose to reach out to you is because one of my co-producers here on the Angel of Words podcast was like, man, like this girl that I follow on Instagram who I've known for a while, a friend of mine, feels exactly the same way you do. And we're talking about the African diaspora here in America and Latino America, and the denial of your blackness and acting like it doesn't exist. It bothers me, Miss Whitfield, when I hear words like cocolo, moyo, Haitianos. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And you know what's crazy?
How does that make you
when
feel?
I was thinking about the conversation this morning, because I couldn't sleep last night. It was just whatever. But when I was thinking about the conversation, I was like, I haven't heard moyo in a long time. And look how you brought it up. It's these words that interculturally that we've said that's been engraved in us for us to say. And I'm going to share that when growing up in America, because I grew up in America, but I'm first generation from my parents who are Dominican. And they came to the United States looking for what everybody's looking for, a better opportunity, work, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you grow up, I grew up in Washington Heights. When you grow up with your own, with your kind, with your people, it kind of keeps you in a box, right? So this is what you see. Dominicans, this is who we are. Oh, Boricuas, they're like this. Oh, Lo Moreno, you gotta be careful. Oh, this, oh, this. So it's everyone always comparing themselves to another, right? Instead of us looking at each other as human beings. And so my experiences, I grew up in Washington Heights, but my school was closer to Harlem because we were like the beginning of Washington Heights. And I remember my brother being beat up by what they call a Moreno, right? And so it was portrayed by my grandmother that you have to be careful with the Morenos. And I put it in quotes. You have to be careful that they're dangerous and that they're going to hurt you. And so you see that my brother's in fifth grade. He got beat up by one. Oh, my God, is this true? And so you keep growing up and you start listening to minor things. And if you see my grandmother, may she rest in peace, bien trigueña, real trigueña, old school Dominican, you could tell she has a good percentage of Taino in her. Bien trigueña. Really dead hair, beautiful. But she would look and frown upon black people and African Americans because in the countries and what they were saying that there's violence, that there's this. And so you come here and you start assuming and thinking that they're all this way, right? So that's your first experience. Then you grow up and you have no friends, right? No friends who are African American because most of my friends were what? Latino. And I look in Washington Heights in my neighborhood until you start branching off. Then you go to middle school and you find a friend and you're like, oh, wait, you Haitian. Haiti's right there by the Dominican Republic. But you darker skin, but you speak a little bit of Spanish, but you also speak this. You start wondering and questioning yourself. It's not till you get to high school right? That you start really integrating with a lot of different people. It's not till you get to college. It's not till you start asking questions. Who am I? Who am I? And what is made of me? Because I don't really fit in here. I don't fit in with the Dominicans because I wasn't born and raised in DR, right? Fit in with the Puerto Ricans, but I vibe with them. We look alike, right? I'm not black, quote unquote. Again, I'm gonna say I'm not black. I'm Dominican. Who am I? And so when you start searching and start asking questions and you're sitting with your ancestors, and I say ancestors because none of my grandmothers are here, so now they're my ancestors. You start reflecting. Abuela, where did our family come from? And when I sat one day with my grandmother in DR, rocking the chair in el patio, I was like, Abuela, ¿de dónde viene la familia? Where's our family from? We have Taino, we have European, and we have African. But what's interesting with all of that is that when we talk about the European, the light, your face lights up. Oh, que la familia, tú sabes que éramos de España, con los ojos claros y con el pelo bueno, lo que sea. That's how your mom got her hair. That we're from Spain, you got like clear eyes and beautiful skin. You hear white in the race, white in the family. Don't bring a black guy. So what's interesting is that my parents never instilled that in me, in my siblings or anything. But I would hear that from my grandmother. And so I asked those questions. And to be quite frankly honest, I was happy when I learned that I had African in me. I was like, oh, so that's what makes Dominicans okay. I got African. I love African music. Yeah. I love drums. I love this. Like, this is a whole different spiel. And to me, it was different. It was different. It was like, okay, we have the Spaniard side, but that never interested me. Quite frankly, it never interested me at all. And so
but it seems to interest a lot of people, though.
Right, it does, right? You think, and look at me. I'm light skinned Afro Latina, right? Look at my hair, right?
Yeah.
I'm light skinned Afro Latina. You know, you and I, we could be siblings. You could be Puerto Rican or Dominican or whatever. Like, you know, we all have an intermix of things, but we get so caught up in this separation, segregation of who's better than who's lighter than who. And so in school, when you're learning about the civil rights movement and slavery and everything, and you go to DR and you're like, well, why she cleaning our floors? Why this one is cooking the food? They're darker than us. Having these conversations with my parents that I was like, I don't feel comfortable. Don't have a maid here while we're here visiting. Because it made me feel uncomfortable. I don't want to be served by a black woman. I don't.
Yeah.
Get yourself a white woman to serve us. Like, that's just how I felt at that point. And so you see the disparities, right? And I've always dated darker skinned guys. My son's father, he's Afro-Latino too. He's Colombian and Dominican, bien trigueño, as they would say, right? I didn't lighten up the race. I was very different from everyone else in my family.
Yeah.
Everyone else in my family. And my husband's African-American. And so where do I feel connected is that.
Yeah, and we don't have these conversations, you know, we have these conversations in the dark.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I'll be honest with you, as this is going on in our country, you know, in America right now, and everything's being brought out into the light, I'm like, well, while we're on this subject, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
Because it happens too much. My grandmother too. Don't bring no black women into the home. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, you know, the black man has become the boogeyman all over the world. That's why there's protests all over the world. And I'm like, yo, how did this happen? And how did this happen within our culture, the Latino culture, with the African diaspora being so large, with millions and millions of dark-skinned Latinos, 79%, 65%, because I'm going to keep it to Dominican, Puerto Rican, because you're Dominican, I'm Puerto Rican. 65% of Puerto Ricans have some kind of African descent in them. 79% of Dominicans have some kind of descent in them. Pew Research Center, for all my people that always who want to say that these aren't facts, they're facts. You can look them up online if you need to.
23andMe,
yeah.
My percentage. You know what I'm saying?
Like, yeah, and I'm like, you know, how could you deny what you are and deny your roots and call people with such derogatory names?
But I'll tell you why. Angel. You know why? Because we erred on the side of the colonizer. The colonizer has told us that white was better. You know, if we took a page out of Haiti's book, if we sat there, because Hispaniola was colonized by two separate sides, it was Spain and the French, and the Haitians spanked the French. They spanked them. Okay,
The
they
first
got them out
country in the Caribbean to get their independence
But you know
without the
what?
help of outside influences.
Exactly. And what did that do? That scared. That scared all of the other colonizers. They were like, hold up. If I find somebody a little lighter, I'm going to make you feel better. I'm going to make you feel better, and I'm going to make you feel better. That this is better. That this lightness is better, and that I'm going to help you, and I'm going to improve you. So now we're going to take away from Haiti. We're going to make them the worst. We're going to take off their resources so that we're not combined together, so that you can see you need us. And so it's always engraved. Look, they were bad. They fought them, and look how worse they are. They're poor. They're this. They're that. The stories that we're saying about them, the terrible stories. My husband always says this. My husband, and he every time we talk about race and ethnicity, he says, I couldn't be a slave because I'd be the one to be killed right away because I'd start a revolution. I'd be like, you, let's go. Because it's 500 of us, and it's like 30 of them, and it's 30 of them mind messing with us, mind telling us, mind effing us, and saying that we're nothing without them. And so Puerto Rico fell for it. You know what I'm saying? Dominican Republic fell for it. Cuba fell for it. Parts of Colombia fell for it. Venezuela fell for it. Brazil with a whole different thing, that they're not any better than this. So when we oppress them, when we suppress them as well, right, making them feel less than, you see, they ain't nothing. They ain't nothing. We are. And so the lighter you are, the better you rise. But the darker you are, the lower you're here on the totem pole. So this is historical. Like when I see how Dominicans talk about Haitians, it boils my blood. And I can see, because I have friends who are Haitians that be like, oh, you Dominican? And give me that look. I'm like, I'm not like my people. I'm not like my people. What my people did to oppress you instead of welcome you, instead of provide you resources, is terrible. You know, we're getting support from the United States. We're doing whatever. We're stuck in the United States, if you will, at this point, because we want to be down so badly. We want to be European so badly. We want to do this so badly. We allow this access. But for people who fought for us, because the initial revolution that fought for us, we shunned them to the side. We've been like, you ain't ish. And that's not fair. And that's what we did in those countries. And that's exactly what's been done here. I'm going to bring these slaves. I'm going to mind mess with y'all. I'm going to tell y'all not nothing without us, that if you do the work, you'll be something. And I'm going to keep y'all suppressed and oppressed. And so this is the image that they've made. When we look at systemic racism, when we look at anti-blackness, look at the newspaper articles that were coming out back in the days. It was of black people looking like animals, literally like animals. Every movie that has come out from back in the days, how were they portrayed? Animals, beasts, hurting people, thieves, criminals, etc. And these are white actors, black-facing, painting themselves, running after a woman to rape her, running after this. So this is what they're doing. They're infiltrating in the media, and what we're seeing now. You see, we too woke right now to fall for it because we got these to fall for anything else. But back in the days when they didn't have that, there was no recordings. This is history still continuing. This is the media
but Jamilly, they
infiltrating
still
that we're
people.
back.
They're still Latinos knowing the facts still do not care at all
Because
whatsoever.
you know what? Because we think we're the shit, and we're not. And we're not. Because honestly, if it wasn't for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that then transitioned
That
to the
led the way.
1965 Immigration Act, we wouldn't be here. We would not be here. And so this is what upsets me in having conversations with, like, I've had to go back and forth with a lot of people, even my own family. I remember half of my family was like going for Trump, and I felt some kind of way. And I was a little smart ass. I was like, let me tell you something. If it wasn't for my father petitioning for all of y'all to come from DR, y'all will still be living in a little hut. So before you out here talk about you want Republican and you want this and you want this without understanding the facts, ustedes habían sido unos campesinos literally wearing rags on the side if my father didn't sacrifice because of the 1965 Immigration Act to have y'all here. Y'all can't make these decisions and talk about other people knowing that they've paved the way. So when we talk about anti-blackness, we're anti-ing ourselves too. At the end of the day, we're anti-ourselves too. But we so damn oppress ourselves by the freaking oppressors that we think it's okay. So we like, nah, but I'm my maiden last name is Garcia. I'm a Garcia. No, I'm a Garcia. But if I step out in an interview and there's a Garcia and there's a Mick whatever, she might get the job before me because you sizing me up right away. You looking at me, you looking at my body, you looking at my hair, you looking at what I'm coming, you looking at my resume, you looking at the schools I went to. And me and her could have gone to the same schools, but you judging me right off the bat. And I don't have to be black for that to happen because it's happening to us. But the problem is that because of immigration and us coming into this country, we silence a lot of things. So we don't come out to fight because we don't want to get deported or we don't want to, ruffle the feathers too much because we didn't ruffle the feathers in our own countries when damn hell we were being oppressed. We allowed it to happen. We allowed them to tell us that black was terrible. Trujillo in the Dominican Republic did the same thing. For 30 years, you ruled the Dominican Republic and you infiltrated hate for the Haitians. You infiltrated hate for people who were dark.
And he's idolized.
Yeah.
He's a hero in the Dominican culture.
He's a hero. I don't know to who. Not to me. Not to me.
I mean, you go uptown, there's a lot of things with his name on it. I'm just talking about like those kind of facts, like, romanticizing him, if you will.
Absolutely. And so you have people under an umbrella. You don't like tanning? I like tanning, under an umbrella, that this and that. And even if you're trigue, you're like, I've heard the most stupidest people, because I'm sorry, some of my people can be very stupid. But like, yo no soy moreno. Mi amor, pero mírate el color. Like, look at your skin color. What you talking about? You got African in you too. I had a cousin, when I had my discovery of like, who are my ancestors? I was like, yo, because we African and Taino and European. My cousin was like, yo, we ain't African. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. So when your co-producer was telling you about this has been on a rampage, I decided to be sarcastic and petty as hell on my Instagram and put, oh, look, where did we come from? Put up my 23andMe. I'm African. And actually, my percentage of Native American is much smaller than the comparison of African. I'm literally almost like 40. It was like 42% Spain and Portugal and 38% of African. The others were like Ashkenazi Jewish and Sri Lankan, all different things, and 7% unknown. But do you
even if it's 1%, you're African. It's in you.
Thank you.
And it's like the denial with all the facts, and it's why? Like it is just so sad that people feel embarrassed. They feel embarrassed to be associated with 75% of Latino America. Those are the facts. 75% of Latino Americans that have some kind of African American descent inside of them will deny the fact that they have that.
So I was reading
that is sad.
There was a CNN article that came out yesterday, right? And some of the percentages that came out in Pew Research says some Latinos identify as white, right? A quarter in the U.S. identify as Afro-Latino, Afro-Caribbean, or of African descent. And they were talking about how Latinos do not acknowledge racism because you see more of the side of the immigration component. But we don't do our research. We get so stuck on the damn Spaniard side or the Portuguese side that we think that that's the end-all be-all. And at the
because
same
of the Latin
time,
media. The Latin media. 40 years, not one black anchor. 40 years, not one black anchor.
But you want to know something? The American men, right, that control the Spanish media, how are all the women portrayed?
Sexy.
Let's talk about what they're wearing.
Sexy, heels, sexual.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're hypersexual.
Exactly.
Bottom line.
So you look at Latino news and you're just like, you look at American CNN news and you're like, so what is that? So you being oppressed right there by the media as well. What are they saying? What are they saying? That this is what you
have
are.
to be
You're
beautiful. Yeah, you have
You're
to look. You have to look some kind of way. Yeah, exactly what you're saying.
Absolutely, you're a sex symbol at the end of the day. So when we're denying our roots, we're denying our blackness, and having conversations like I was saying when I first started dating my husband. The cab driver in Spanish was like, "Why you with a black man?" I said, "Well, why not?" Well, but you don't want to be with your own.
Audacity.
Because y'all cheaters. Yes. I was like, no, because y'all cheaters. Yes. Because y'all cheaters, and I don't want to be with a Dominican man. And at the end of the day, you African too. Y'all could be cousins. Like it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. When we go to DR, when my husband and I go to DR, people are looking at him like, yo, is he Haitian? Like, where you from? But then when we see Haitians, they like, tapase, like, yo, that's one of ours. That's one of ours. Now we a community. We all together. This mistreating each other because you think you're higher than, because you feel like you have a better status. Why? Do you know how many inventors are of African descent, and white Europeans stole their stuff? Like literally stole whatever, like the invention. I can't even remember what the invention was. I was watching a show, but you're stealing from them because you think that they're not worthy of inventing something. And you don't put it out there. They don't have it in history book that the first woman,
well, look at the Egyptians who built the pyramid. I'm sure they weren't white.
Thank you.
Pretty sure about that.
They definitely weren't. Definitely weren't. Definitely weren't.
Go out on a limb. You know?
Exactly. Definitely weren't. Jesus was not white either, but you know.
What I mean? For real. And that geometry is stellar. So this day, mathematicians like, man, this is on point.
Listen, I sometimes think, I'm like, maybe they killed Jesus. I think they killed Jesus because I think he was black. Jesus was black, and they was like, you ain't white, so we just gonna kill you. Like, you know, I'm just saying, like, you start thinking about all these things on how people mistreated others, and it makes sense. I looked at it. Have you seen, what is her name? Why am I forgetting her name? The one that invented the hot comb. I just saw her,
I haven't
Madam
used a hot comb
Walker.
in a while.
Madam C.J. Walker.
Yes.
They had a Netflix series on her, and it's interesting. You know, she created like this hair thing and hot comb, et cetera, et cetera. And the lady who she had competition with was mixed, so she was white and black, and she felt she was higher than because she was lighter than Madam C.J. Walker. And made Madam C.J. Walker life hell. If Madam C.J. Walker wasn't as determined as who she was and got to the millions and all that stuff and didn't let this lady get to the middle of her, but when they showed that lady's story, she's actually the daughter of a slave master. And so, yeah, you got your lightness because they taught you that was better. But at the end of the day, your story came from trauma. And that's what's happened. Every black person's story, our ancestors' story came from trauma. When we talk about generational trauma and the things we go through, and this is me getting into my therapeutic social work element, which we're going to discuss
we're going to discuss that too. You know, we're going to get there's a couple topics I want to touch on. You know, this was the first one.
Yeah, go ahead. Cause
and I wanted to mention the fact also of the bleaching of the skin and, you know, and Afro-Latinos spending $6 billion a year on those kind of products. And it's just, you know, but it all goes into this conversation. You know, we have all the facts. I don't understand why we have to be so scared, you know, and you know, why we can't embrace, you know, that part of our culture, you know, when we have all these facts, you know, and it's like you said, it's just a medley of oppression coming from all over the place, coming from the media, coming from the things that you're taught in school, the things that the people that you hang around with, you know, your elders that speak this way, and all that horrible concoction has made the Latino like embarrassed of their black, well, not all of us, but like some of us,
naive,
you know,
naive, even beyond embarrassment, it's naive. I got here to where I'm at, the status. I don't want to be associated with that because that's what media has portrayed. That's what history books have portrayed. That's what they've infiltrated in our head with that. And me saying that is how people perceive blackness, which is hurtful. Black is beautiful. Let me tell you, like I said, my son, his father, real trigueño. I was begging for my son to come out dark skinned and not my skin color. Like begging. I was like, God, and my baby come trigueñito. Like it's beautiful. Skin tone, melanin is beautiful. Embrace it. Why do we have to run from it? It's a gift God gave you. It is a beauty. It is an honor to be able to not have to worry about skin cancer.
Yeah.
You know, melanin is beautiful.
And you know what? And also, you know, before we end this conversation, this part of the conversation, you know, I just want to let the public know the words that we use to describe black people, whether they're offensive or not. So that way they know whether they're being, dehumanized or not. Like Moreno, like in Puerto Rico, when we say Moreno, to us is just like, describing a light-skinned person. Is there a negative connotation to that where you come from in DR?
No, in DR, my
okay.
sister-in-law, her name is Morena. Her nickname, how she goes by is Morena. And so in the salon, because her predominant clientele is African American, she doesn't go by that. She obviously goes by her first name, but in DR, everybody knows her Morena. Because it's a term of endearment, if you will.
Yeah. Now, Negrito, I've had a lot of Spanish girls call me Negrito. You know what I mean? I never really took offense to it. I just thought of it as a, darker skinned Latino. But like, I don't know, how is that stigmatized in the Dominican culture?
Negrito is also kind of similar, but it has its little demeaning aspect to it. Because we'll mostly say Moreno, but never, it'll be used as, it's a Negrito ahí. It's a negrita, like with that kind of face.
Prieto, I don't like. I don't like that word.
No.
You hear that? There's a problem.
And then and the only thing is like when you say prieto, you're also combining it and using it and everything. Ay, ella estaba tan prieto, lo que sea, o una ropa bien. No, ropa they do say negra, but yeah, prieto is to describe your skin tone.
Yeah.
And the more prietos you add to it, it's like you darker. So it's prieta, then you dark.
Yeah. Okay. So it is kind of like a color situation, but still, if you're saying it in anger, it's something you may want to stay away from. You know what I mean? It may have some negative connotations to it. Now, we know Cocolo, Moyo, and Haitiano, which I think is the most disrespectful one. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're calling a whole race of, it's like, and the race of people that liberated the Caribbean first.
Thank you.
It's like the oxymoron there. It's just like, it's so ridiculous.
Stupid. I'm like, my people, they just.
Yeah.
Woo.
Well, there Well, there you go, my people. Now you know the words to stay away from, which ones are no good.
And Moyo, I don't think Moyo has been used in a very long time.
Yeah.
It's been years I haven't heard that.
Well, unfortunately, I still hear that, in some Latin circles I had to disassociate myself with way before this even, before any of this transpired. Now, I also want to talk about you and working with child abuse victims. And first and foremost, Beauteous Me, an amazing podcast. I'm going to be honest with you, everyone out there that's listening right now. Please check out Beauteous Me. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple Podcasts. And I guess wherever else you get your podcasts.
Everywhere.
That the podcast, I'm going to tell you something right now. Because I have to apologize. Sometimes I can be one of those like insensitive males, but man, listening to this podcast really made me sympathize and get a sense of understanding of what women go through on so many different levels, as a mother, as a lover, as a person dealing with any kind of illnesses, because you're an expert in social work, so you bring that aspect of it, that psychological aspect, and saying that your job is about to get a whole lot tougher because now they're talking about defunding the police and giving you guys a lot of the work that they had to do when it came to dealing with people with mental health issues on the street and things of that nature. Now they're talking about funding you guys to deal with those on-call situations, just as if you would if it was like an ACS case or anything of that matter. But we're doing it now anyways. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, and I think it's a beautiful thing because you're giving too much responsibility to cops that aren't trained for these kind of situations. They don't take those kind of classes. They don't understand. They don't do case studies. They don't go out there into the field and do internships with people that are suffering from mental health issues. So I think that's a great idea, and I know there's a lot of people out there mad because the cops are being defunded, but they have to understand the logistics of it. There are some things that cops should just not be handling. Bottom line, because they're not qualified.
Though, that when we added the funding, we took away from every school system. So when there were like 3.5 million students, let's just say there were 3,000 students in one school, and they added the resources to cops, but they took away a social worker just to add that resource. And you know, if it was another school that had maybe 20,000 students, they took away a school psychologist. They took away a counselor. They took away this because they added all this policing inside the school. So you took away the support for the kids. Like when we look at that video from that little girl in Florida who was 5, 6, 7 or whatever, that the police arrested her. Like, are you kidding me? This girl has behavioral issues. She has trauma. She's experiencing something. When you have trauma, trauma sits in your body and you don't know how to manage it. And kids, if we don't know how to manage it as an adult, imagine you getting a phone call, God forbid, you know, somebody you love passed away suddenly, got shot, or this happened, etc. Your body goes through a crazy equilibrium, and you don't even know. You pacing, you holding your head. You don't know what to do. You know, some people light up cigarettes or do this or do that, and you're out of your mind, right? You're out of your element. Imagine a kid who hasn't developed those skills because they've experienced trauma, and so their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. The trauma is pinging on here, and it's minimizing from the forefront where they can make rational decisions because they haven't gotten there. You don't develop it until, you know, your late teens. And so the way the system treats, how they treated that police officer treated that black child, okay, in the school system in Florida was horrible. And I wonder how much they spent on police actions in that school instead of having a social worker, instead of having a guidance counselor, instead of having a school psychologist. And so when I work, the work that I do with kids, I work with kids as young as age 5 and as old as age 17 and even up to kids at 21. And I've been doing this for such a long time.
And that's the START program you're talking about, correct?
So,
yeah.
So this program,
just elaborate on it now that we're on it.
So
yeah.
I work with kids all across New York State. So if we want to talk about racial disparity, I even got white kids in my foster care system. So the conversations, and I'll tell you about my conversation with a little boy today. But I work with kids who've been traumatized, who've been sexually abused, physically abused, neglected, school neglect, neglecting of resources, commercial sexually exploited and trafficked, so sex trafficked. You name it. You know, I've nothing ever surprises me when I'm getting a new case. You know, kids, you know, from Yonkers, gang rape, you name it, like from so many different locations. And all these kids, not only are they fighting with systemically what they're going on at home, because there's so many microcosms, what you experience at home, what you experience at school, what you experience at your community. So imagine if all of it is jacked up. Your house is jacked up because your parents are neglectful or using substances. The neighborhood you live in, everybody's in poverty. Everybody got something going on, right? The school you go to, you're being bullied. You got the odds all against you. Then here comes the Department of Social Services, removes you. You in placement, here's a whole nother factor. So we add a layer of trauma to trauma to trauma to trauma. So how are you expecting these kids to navigate the system? Even if they never enter foster care, right? And you still got the odds against you. A parent with mental illness, no resources, lack of resources, and a community that's against you, and bullying. You know what I'm saying? So when people act out, the system wants to come in, police wants to come in, come grab you up, knock you on the floor, et cetera, because you're doing something that's aggressive. Where's the aggression coming from, though? The aggression is coming from the trauma, the lack of resources, the lack of love, the lack of attention. And when I say resources, it could be as simple as food, simple as clothing, resources, being able to have a tutor, support with the school. When we look at kids who are failing, you know, I've shared so many of my stories in my podcast because I keep it real. And so I experienced some significant sexual abuse and trauma in my childhood, right? And I was failing school. Nobody asked me. Nobody asked me what was going on. They kept labeling me as stupid. They kept adding me to resources. They kept saying I needed to see the guidance counselor. I needed a tutor. I needed this. I needed that. Nobody came and asked me what was going on internally that was affecting this. Because there's so much that goes on that affects children and how they show up in school or the community. And so when we look at systemically also what's going on, I have kids from the upper counties who are white, right? And they come into my program, and my staff are black and brown. And you got a Latina director, an Afro-Latina director. And so these kids will come and call staff the N-word. The other day, this kid told the staff the N-word, you be this, go back to Africa. So today, you know, he's He's only 8 years old, but he's a very bright kid, and so you have to have bright conversations. And so my conversations aren't like, you know what, you really shouldn't say that, and you should apologize. My conversations were like, do you have a right to call somebody that? Your family didn't take this. We built this country. This country was stolen by Indians. So just going by history and explaining, I said, you're offending me as a director and saying that people need to go to Africa because I came from Africa. And having like simple questions. And I said, I mean, every day you're being taken care of by a black and brown person. There ain't no white person taking care of you. Do you think that's fair? Now you're going to go apologize to everybody. And he sure did. That little boy sure did apologize. I'm sorry for telling you this. I'm sorry for this. I was like, all right. And I don't want to hear it again.
And it's like they learn this stuff that's what I'm saying. You learn this stuff at a young age.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Because there's been plenty of kids that we've had to watch that have triggered staff who are white, and they're like, oh, F-U-N-N-N and triggering the staff. So, you picking at the wrong people who have racial trauma every day. Racial trauma every day is not helpful. And now I got to watch this little white kid, and you calling me this every day. You bringing me back to my ancestors' days. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where black people were raising white people's children. And so having these conversations is important every day. Systemically, when we look at kids in foster care, and especially because I work in a residential, when you work with kids in residential, if we're not drilling into them on their trauma and helping them, we're preparing them for a second system. And you know what system is that? It's the jail system. And that's just the truth, because you're being institutionalized here and your mindset is institutionalized, so you're ready for the next institution. And every day, every single day, they're like, Ms. Garcia, you going to come up on the spiel? Yeah. You are a black and brown kid in a white neighborhood, in a white setting, in a white system, because your judges are white, your lawyers are white. And at the end of the day, the more you keep adding to these behaviors, the more you keep doing this and you think it's okay, destruction of property or fighting this or fighting that, the more ammunition you're giving them to keep you longer into the system. The more ammunition you're keeping them to label you. The more ammunition you adding on to the legal components of the system. Like when Raise the Age happened with the laws that you can't try a 16, 17-year-old, depending on the criminal thing, I agree with it depending on the crime, and I completely agree with it because of the kind of kids that I work with. I work with a lot of juvenile delinquents as well. And so there's trauma behind it. They're not coming out to act out.
Jamilly, the poorest demographic in the United States are children.
Yeah.
I keep telling people, if you start off on the right foot to get back on that foot to win this race called life, it's going to be tough. What happens when an Olympian gets off on the wrong foot? In the Olympics, it's rare that they win the race. And people just do not understand how deep rooted and rotted the system is and how there really is no way out.
It's to fail you in so many circumstances. Like, a lot of my social work friends, it's easy. They were like, defund the police, defund foster care too. Put more services into the communities. And it's the truth. Put more services into the communities. How do we help these families? How do we help these kids to prevent them? There's some kids that, they need to be removed because if you being sexually abused by your father, your mother's watching, and
you see these things, and you see this is real. Like people don't understand. A lot of them are living like animals, man.
Yeah.
You hear these stories in social work, and you guys deserve so much money. I think you're one of the most underrated workforce, some of the most underrated workforce in the United States of America. I've been telling people this forever. I used to tell people you couldn't pay me enough to be a social worker. I'll be honest with you, because you see the worst of humanity.
And let me tell you something. It's not a black and brown issue, because my white clients, this client that we had, trailer, okay, white trailer. He was naked when they found him, butt naked, bottles and bottles and bottles of alcohol in mom's home, trash thrown everywhere, glass broken. And this is a kid who has severe mental health needs, obviously being abused and neglected. But he wasn't black or brown. He sure wasn't. This was a white family, a white family. And he repeats because of his condition. He's repeating everything that happened in his house. You're not shit. I can't stand you. I hate you. This is everything the mom was saying to him, and we're hearing it. So when people sit out here and be like, black and brown people are taken from the system. No, did we not see the statistics that it's actually more people who are on food stamps who are white?
Well, the system is made to help everybody out. What difference does it make what colors we are?
Right.
You know, the problem is...
But people who don't know think that it's us abusing the system, which is adding more to the oppressive side.
Exactly. That's a fact. That's a fact.
It's adding
because
more to it.
they politicize it. That's the thing. They politicize it, and the next thing you know, all of a sudden, we're the bad guy. You know what I mean? And that's why we have to say what we say, and that's why we have to spit the real facts out. You know? But like on a human side, it's like, man, like if somebody's in help, we help them. Yeah. Let's cultivate and develop the youth. Let's put them in positions to succeed. Kids were being terrorized. I was being terrorized growing up in Harlem. I'm a quintessential Puerto Rican. I grew up in Spanish Harlem, and I'm one first generation Boricua.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And during the stop and frisk era, I was stopped and frisked, arrested, a kid that graduated from college, such as myself, that was grinding. You know what I mean? Yeah, I had a smoking habit, but come on, like that's basically legal now.
Right?
Yeah.
You fit the description?
You know I fit the description.
That's what I mean. You fit the description, right? So what's the description? Let's say what's the description?
Well, I mean, the description is a minority.
Thank you.
A minority, dark skin, with some, wearing a hoodie or wearing some kind of cool clothes or wearing Jordans or wearing Nikes or whatever the case may be.
Exactly.
And it's unfortunate. And I was happy, I'm not happy. I was lucky, fortunate, that something bad didn't happen to me, man, by the grace of God.
Right.
And that's what a lot of people don't understand. We were terrorized. We grew up scared of the cops. We don't grow up you telling me that a cop is supposed to be nice to you and a part of your community? That is such a foreign ideal to me. And I hate when I have friends that I grew up with in the same projects acting now as adults because they feel like they live in a better circumstance, like, oh no, like, I'm like, yo, bro, we used to run from the cops together. They were never our friends.
Like, did you forget? Like, because you moved out the project, you kind of forgot? I hope you ain't forget.
Like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know when it became cool to live in fantasy. Mm-hmm. And that's why I love your podcast. I'll be honest with you.
Thank you.
It's unfortunate I don't get to listen to more podcasts because I'm actually, because I'm making one.
Right, because you grinding.
You know what I mean? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, and mine has video and I got to edit and I got to market. And I get caught up in all these other things. Mm-hmm. But, listening to your podcast, you really get a grasp on reality. And that's because, I'm tired of listening to fantasy and people politicizing everything and making everything about. I'm like, when does things start becoming about your best interest and about right and wrong? Mm-hmm. Some things are just right, some things are just wrong, some things just don't feel good. And
you have to be able to speak up on it. When we talk about systemically, a few years ago I was pissed off at the judicial system because I had a set of white kids that were in my program. Their parents had substance abuse issues. Those little boys went home faster than when another kid that came at the same time from the system. And I was so vocal about it. And I was like, so they got discharged today because they white, basically. Oh, why would you say that? Because I have this kid who came at the same time that they both came, and the parents have about the same issues, but because they white, they going home. And what happened? They weren't ready to go home, but they fought it. They had lawyers. They had this. The kids ended up coming back in the system because the parents weren't clean. So you out here doing these things, endangering these kids because what? They're white. They feel entitled. They had all these things. But meanwhile, this other mother who's fighting for sobriety, you know what I'm saying? Because she's black and brown, going into rehab, doing what she got to do, and you keep asking her more. Well, we need more urine. Well, we need more toxicology. Well, we need more this. Well, we need more that. Like, we need human people to really sit here in the work that we do to fight for our people. Justly, there are some parents where I'm just like, you ain't got a grandma to send your baby to because I don't think you're going to make it, mama. I don't think your baby going to go back to you. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just the truth. But you try to fight the best that you can. And it's one thing that I always say to the kids, I don't ever want you in my program for a long time, and I don't keep them for a long time. I bust my behind, and I get my staff behind it to really reduce the amount of time they're there, because then you get institutionalized. And the longer that I've seen kids bounce from one institution to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. Unfortunately, I had a former client pass away a few months ago in a jail. And that was hard. That was hard to hear, because it was like, yo, how many conversations I had with that boy? Manage your aggression. What can we do to support you? This aggression is going to get you.
But Jamilly, when you don't have any help, when you don't have somebody, some people need cheerleaders, man.
Yeah.
Some people need somebody there with them. You know what I mean? And these kids are growing up with no parents or parents that have issues themselves. But this is decades of deterioration. People don't understand. Not all of us are lucky enough to grow up with our family. To have a support system.
And I'll tell you something, I take a non-conventional approach as the director in that program, because I'm not just, okay, well, I'm here to run the program and that's it. When one of my kids is acting up, I talk to you as if you were my child. I'm like, come here, what are you wearing? Go change your clothes. Go do this. Why are you not doing schoolwork? Why I got an email from the teachers that y'all not finishing your remote learning, or y'all were all acting up, y'all. And I treat them like a parent. And it's interesting, we had some kids who got in trouble, and the officers came up to serve them papers or whatever, and they heard me ripping them a new one. Like, I didn't care who was there. He brought it up to me, and this was several months ago. He was like, you really treat your kids as if you're their mother. And I said, yeah, because they don't have a parent right now, and they need to understand these different guidelines, these different bylaws, and what the system is going to eat them up. The system is going to eat you up, and if I'm not having these conversations because no one had it with you before, I'm going to have it with you. I'm going to tell you what the reality is and what you're going to face.
They need to learn structure.
Yeah.
You need to learn structure.
And
without
caring,
structure,
because
you can't
I do
succeed.
it caring. Yeah, and I do it in a caring way, and they know, they're like, all right, can I get a hug? Can I get this? You have to be, it's that tough love. I will rip you a new one, and the next day be like, yo, you've been doing so good. What you want from Amazon? I'll order you whatever you want. Just to kind of keep them motivated and engaged.
Well, just to give them inspiration. I mean, I really appreciate what you guys do out there on the field, man. And I really hope that after everything that we've been going through lately and the unfortunate deaths, I hope these deaths lead to some major changes in our urban communities. Yeah. I really hope so. Yeah. Changes that'll develop healthy relationships. And you talk about toxic relationships on one of your podcasts, and and I look at it like it's not only toxic. You can have toxic relationships with your friends, with your family members. I feel like there's less toxicity in more affluent areas. Like they actually, like I don't know, like I don't know.
Why? You know why I kind of disagree, because where we live, and my son is like a handful of colored kids in his school. Yeah. Handful. And he was part of a basketball team. Like it was like a Saturday clinic or whatever. And I heard this little white boy cussing. When I tell you cussing at his mama, cussing, I'm not gonna do this, and I don't feel like. I stood there and my son was like, Mom, don't say nothing. Mommy, don't say nothing. Bobby, don't say nothing. Bobby, don't say nothing. Because the entitlement, the disrespect for the parents, and the parents letting them do everything. You think there's no toxicity? When these kids, when I look at the rate, because I speak to the officers out here, I speak to different people out here. Oh, there's a marijuana problem over there in that school. Oh, so there's another kind of problem over there. Okay, I'm glad to know that it's not just our black and brown people. And that's just been my attitude lately. Like, don't be throwing glass stones over here, because my son, freshman, I think it was like 8th grade, he told me one of his friends went to rehab. Rehab at 8th grade?
Yeah, I mean, the opioid crisis has been hitting hard the white community, man.
Like rehab? I was like, baby, that ain't your friend. Please don't be friends with him. Yeah. Don't. Yeah. That ain't your friend. Like, even he sees it. He's like, yo, they're so disrespectful to their moms. I know that wouldn't be you. You're right. I know you wouldn't talk to me like that. But you see it. You see it. They just do a better job at hiding it. Why? Privilege. White privilege lets you hide a whole lot. A whole lot. And
Well,
it's sad.
hopefully we can start closing that gap and getting some privileges and getting some money coming our way for our educational systems. Because,
Absolutely.
you know, I mean, getting 1/3 of what affluent people get, it's not cool. You know what I'm
It's
saying?
about voting. One thing that I learned, I don't know if you
Hmm.
follow Brujas of Brooklyn on Instagram. They have some
Sounds
really,
fantastic. No, I
yeah,
haven't. No, I don't
they
follow
have
them, but I will.
they have
Yeah.
amazing material. So they had done a talk and they were like, educating people on voting. And what's interesting is like not even on voting, but on the census. So you know how we put what's your race, black, white, other. Some of
Well,
us
you
will
have to
put
fill out the
some.
census. You get more money in your areas that way. Yeah.
So if you fill out other, it goes automatically to white.
Mm.
And that was so impacting because when we think about where do we belong, right? We think about race, but I'm not black, but I'm not white. I'm other because I'm Cuban, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm Dominican, right? You clicking other, all them services that should be coming to me are going to white. Interesting. I was mind boggled with it and I was like, oh, so this is why it's important for us to get to know who we are because it matters in every single step of the way. Our US Census.
Well, you know, that takes people going into reality, being comfortable with what it is that they are, and that's just a psychological situation that hopefully changes. But you know, that's the human being themselves. They have to want to be comfortable with that. Now, the last topic of conversation that I want to discuss, you know, is domestic violence and, you know, your work with that during the coronavirus pandemic and the rise in cases.
So I did an IG
what do
live
you
with
think
one
about
of my
that?
friends
Hmm.
who runs a domestic violence shelter and clinic,
Hmm.
and
What's it
the
called?
well, I can't say the name of it because it is
Oh,
the
it's
shelter.
anonymous. Okay.
Yeah, well, the name of the shelter is anonymous, but the other program is called Hope's Door, and it's in Westchester
Okay.
County, so that's where she works at. But
Okay.
we had an awesome conversation talking about domestic violence and how it's on the rise and how the work that they've had to do in her clinic on the back end with telemental health is a lot of phone call checking in, giving people like secret phones to call, check in with their mental health clinicians because they couldn't actually make it to the DV locations like the offices or the shelters. But the rise, of course, because now if you're in an intimate partnership, right, and you're together and you're the sole provider, and now you haven't worked for months. So imagine when you were working and you were frustrated, you were beating my ass, right? So now you ain't working. Now you even more frustrated because you got your own set of issues. Now you triple beating my ass. And so now you're really making me feel like nothing. Now you're really taking even more resources from me because I depended on you. And so with domestic violence, it's all about a resource thing, right? What can I take from you to make sure that you need me? You ain't ish without me is the kind of model. And so this pandemic, scary enough, there's a rise in kids being sexually abused right now and not being able to tell nobody. Kids being physically abused at home, not being able to tell nobody. And intimate partners, male or female, where it's such on a rise because where are you gonna run to? Who are you gonna run to when everyone is quarantined and nobody wants you home? Nobody wants you in their place. Or you can't do this or they took away your access or resource to even a mask. So you can't even go to the supermarket to be like, code word, call somebody. You don't have a mask. So you can't go into the Walgreens or the CVS or whatever. And so I'm hoping that with the changes that are occurring, with the curve going down, that more work is going to be done. I know there's so many conversations with the National Domestic Hotline and so much work out there to really try to strategize different ways. So now, like texting, some people have phones. A lot of people have phones, even though they're in an intimate partner violence relationship. But even like secret text, even a separate app, like things that are being handled so that you can check in and be like, I'm okay. This is what's going on, or I need this, or preparing for your next move because it's dangerous out there. And since this pandemic, I've just prayed for a lot of different populations, even girls that are sexually trafficked right now and going through multiple pimps, etc. So it's been a lot.
What spawned your interest, like in this kind of public service, in social work? Like, how did you become a social worker? Like, what made you want to go in this path?
So interesting enough, and obviously it always has to come back to Latino roots, right? Your Latinx roots. So I was a sophomore, my first semester, sophomore year in college, and I had this professor in my college, Dr. Hernandez, and I will never forget. She walked in that classroom with a pencil skirt, heels, beautiful Afro Latina, and I was just in her class. It was an elective, a social work elective, and I was like, I want to be like you when I grow up. And that class just showed all the differences because I started off as a psych major, but I didn't feel connected to psychology. And I felt connected to the grassroots work and what came from it, and advocacy and helping in changing policies and changing laws and systems. And so in taking that class, which was like an intro to it, I fell in love. And I've always known that I wanted to work with children, mostly adolescents. That's where my niche is. Like, I love working with as badass as teenagers can be or portrayed to be. I love working with them. They feel misunderstood, but I love advocating for them, and I love advocating for people in general. And there's always what we're called wounded healers. I have my own story. I have my story of growing up in Washington Heights, multiple siblings, in poverty, having to wear hand-me-downs, going through sexual abuse and trauma at a young age. So there's so many things. And then into adulthood, losing a brother to substance abuse. So there's so much to me in the components in knowing that this is my destiny and this is the work that I love to do in advocating and supporting and providing those therapeutic services to people.
Now, what would you tell, a young lady or a man who has been sexually abused and can't get these kind of resources to try to fight back, that feeling of inadequacy?
So a few things. Own your story. Sexual abuse and trauma can debilitate you if you allow it to. It can own you if you allow it to. Owning your story is not to say that it was okay, that what happened to me was okay, but that this is a journey that I went through, and you're going to get help and healing. And a lot of root work has to be done with it, and part of it is also forgiving yourself. Because one thing that we do as sexual abuse survivors is beat ourselves up all the time. I shouldn't have. They didn't believe me. The X, Y, and Z. Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself. And there's hope in healing, and talk to someone. I didn't realize my story until I actually had to write about it as my college essay, my college entry, where the trauma relived, and like they asked some kind of question, and I was like, oh, I went through this. I didn't share my honest story until adulthood and telling my parents who it was and my siblings who it was and owning that part of it. But being able to share my story, to heal my story has been amazing and uplifting, because I could have gone down so many different paths. And I did do a lot of self-destructive things in my adolescence. Absolutely. Promiscuity, you name it. But get the help. Don't feel like you're alone, because you're not alone. There's so many people who have experienced it. You're not alone. You're not alone. You're not crazy. This was not done intentionally to you. You're not just a person who's not worthy. You're worthy. You're loved. You're beautiful. You're amazing. You're smart. You're talented, and you can do this. And you're not alone. There's a community out there.
Now, what if you reached out to someone, and this has happened to you? You reach out to someone and they don't believe you, because that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be a parent. Like, how do you deal with that?
And that's okay, because that's there. I've talked about this in my podcast. It's not saying what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. And so sometimes when someone doesn't believe the narrative, and I've seen that a lot in situations of incest, where the parent doesn't want to believe that their other child could have hurt their other child, right? Is that understanding what happened to that parent, what happened to my aunt, or what happened to my mom, or whatever, that we keep looking to the side. Because we do that a lot in the Latino culture. We'll talk shit about anti-blackness or whatever, but we'll look the other way when we know that Uncle Timmy likes to be the only pedophile and looking at all the young girls, right?
Yeah,
but
it's a fact. It's a
fact, though. But it's okay if they don't believe you, because it's your story. It's your story to tell. It's what you've experienced. And if people turn around, it's something in them that they're trying to protect or hide or do this to. So when someone is saying, oh, I don't believe you, that couldn't have happened, There's something that they want to hide and protect. And that's on them. It's not on you. You feel liberated. You told your story. They didn't believe you. That's on them. It's not on you.
Yeah, because that could become a burden on your shoulders, man.
It does.
Like, you know,
and then you start
for,
blaming yourself again. Oh, you see, and this. It's not. It really is not. It is the most liberating thing. Like, you didn't want to believe me? Oh, wow. This happened to me, and I know what happened to me. And that's okay.
Well, Miss Whitfield, it has been an absolute pleasure. Where can we find you doing your thing? Please talk to us.
Yes.
Social media. What's up with the podcast? Who's coming up? What's happening?
So actually, I'm dropping a new episode tomorrow. It's on divorce and being the non-custodial parent for a mother. Not for, right? Because men are usually the non-custodial parents. But what about
I don't even know what that means. I'll be honest with you. Could you put me on real quick?
No, that's fine.
I don't have any kids.
So usually, like, if a man and a woman are not together and y'all had a kid, who does the kid usually go live with?
The mom.
Right. So now this is a podcast on the reverse situation. The kids didn't go live with the mom. They went to go live with the dad. And how that mom was shunned in all mother communities. Like, how dare you? You abandoned your kids. And that's not what it was. And so that's the episode that's dropping. And there's a whole slew of episodes that are out there that you guys could check out. It's Beauteous Me, BeauTeousme. And it's on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. You can find me on Libsyn, on Stitcher, etc. And my Instagram is at beauty, BEAUTY_in_behavior. That's on my Instagram. And why is it beauty and behavior? Because that's actually the definition of Jamilly. So everything's all full circle.
Oh, man. Love it. Thank you so much, Miss Whitfield, for joining our podcast today. And everyone out there, go check out that podcast. It's fire. Beauteous Me. Don't miss it. And if you're a dude, trust me, it'll help enlighten you and actually fix your relationships with a lot of females, man. I'm telling you.
Yes.
Thank you so much for dropping by. I really appreciate it. You take care of yourself, all right?
You take care.
All right, ciao. Hey, everyone. I hope you enjoyed my interview today with licensed clinical social worker Jamilly Whitfield. And don't forget to listen in on her podcast, Beauteous Me. It is fire, and I recommend it to everybody. Check it out. It's dope. And it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts, just like the Angel of Words podcast. Now, folks, if you want to continue viewing what I'm doing on social media, don't forget to @ me at Angel of Words, ENT, all one word. Thank you for tuning in, everybody.